Hey everybody, welcome back to Tanner's Books and Beyond. It's DiverseAthon, day 5, Friday, at least it should be Friday. I'm recording this on Friday, I don't know whether it'll actually come out on Friday or not, so here's what I've read since my last update. I finished If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo, and I quite enjoyed it. I did have to take about a day to think about the ending, because I wasn't sure if I liked it, but eventually I realized that even if it wasn't the one that I expected, it's the happy ending that I deserve, and it's the happy ending that the main character Amanda deserves. Rather than anything material, the ending focuses on the message that you deserve respect, you deserve life, and you deserve love. And really, when you have those three things, everything else just becomes so much easier. I also finished Every Heart a Doorway by Shayna McGuire. This book is about all those children who go and they have adventures in like Neverland or Wonderland or whatever kind of extra-dimensional, child-focused fairy world that they've stumbled into. Eventually, for whatever reason, they either leave or they get kicked out, but they regret this and they want to go back. But not only has the experience emotionally changed them drastically, but also all of their parents and families just think they've gone insane, because obviously it's ridiculous to suggest that when you were missing for those 6 months, you were actually spending like 10 years in the halls of the dead serving the Lord of the Dead and the Lady of Shadows. So they go to a special school where, since all of them have had similar experiences, they all know that everything they've experienced is valid and everything is real. And so they learn how to get over this and accept the fact that they'll probably never be able to return to these worlds, even though some of them actually manage to find the hope that they will, and some of them eventually do. It's also a murder mystery, and quite a graphic one at that, so if you get queasy easily, you might want to brace yourself for this book. Anyways, the reason that this was featured in DiverseAthon is that the main character Nancy is asexual, and then her best friend in the school, Cade, is transgender. I found Cade's story quite interesting because he was kidnapped by the fairies and taken to their world when everyone thought he was a girl, and he's raised to be a princess, but eventually it comes about that he's a prince, and so they kick him out. And so it's unfortunate that the fairies were transphobic like that, but at the same time, that kind of plot just makes so much sense, and you would think it happens so much more often in these kinds of stories. Anyways, Cade and Nancy and some of the other children have to team up and figure out who's committing all these murders inside the school, and it's really great and has some really nice messages and a really nice ending, really satisfying. But it's way too short. It is like less than 200 pages, and this could have been double the size, and not only would it still be fairly short, but you can get so much more great character moments and exposition, so many more details on their worlds and their experiences and how they've grown and changed, and I would love just like a sequel or prequel or some kind of interquel on this that just adds more bulk to it, because it deserves so much more than just this much that it has. And I also read El Deafo by C.C. Bell, which is a graphic novel memoir of C.C.'s childhood, where she went deaf and she had to wear a very large, very obvious hearing aid called a phonic ear. Some people tease her about it, and some people commit other various autisms, like introducing her as the deaf friend, or over-enunciating everything they say, or just shouting at her and thinking that that's gonna help. So eventually she takes all of this and she creates an imaginary alter ego called El Deafo, which is a superhero that uses her deafness and uses her difference as a superpower, which eventually becomes a message of our book. The things that make us different can make us superheroes. This book is adorable, and it's a very charming story of Cece navigating a hearing world as a deaf person, discovering her own deafness and accepting it and using it to make her feel better about herself instead of other people using it to drag her down, and also finding other friends who can do the same and appreciate and respect her deafness. The one thing about this that I was a little bit disappointed by was that there was almost no ASL coverage in it, but at the same time, I can't fault her for that, because again, it's a memoir. Cece never learned really ASL. She went to classes, but she didn't want to actually learn it because she was afraid that would make her stand out. By the time she realizes that it could be a viable way to communicate, she's already basically missed all the classes, and she really doesn't ever learn it again. Now, while I can't fault Cece for not including sign language in the book, because, well, obviously it wasn't a part of her childhood, so why would she include it? But I wish there were more books that had sign language and had characters signing, because I'm hearing, okay, I'm not a member of deaf culture, I'm not an expert on deaf culture by any means. I usually tell people that I know enough to know I barely know anything. But one thing I do know is that deaf children are often encouraged, or pressured really, to learning how to speak vocally instead of learning a sign language. And even schools, historically, and I'm pretty sure there are some that continue this up to this day, they ban sign language in the classes because, I don't know, they think it's unfair to other students, or they think that learning a sign language instead of learning how to speak vocally is gonna somehow hamper the deaf kids learning it. It's all BS. It's ridiculous, and it takes away abilities to communicate with their peers and their culture and their family, and it's stupid. And if you have a deaf kid, you should be teaching them sign language, because that will make their life so much easier. It's another thing I know is that it can be so exhausting for deaf people to try and go through life lip reading and speaking vocally, and doing all of this stuff that we as hearing people take for granted. Anyways, I wish that there were more books that had signing protagonists and signing characters that were encouraged and the sign language wasn't demonized, because as far as I can tell, I've never read a book that has a character using ASL or any kind of sign language. When I was going through the DiverseAthon recommendations, El Defo was only one of 2 books that involved deaf characters. Another deaf book was Signs of Attraction, which is a romance, and it features 2 characters signing to each other. So that's great, but unfortunately I couldn't find it in my bookstore. I think Marley Matlin also has a book series about a little girl who signs, and she has a hearing friend who eventually learns how to communicate with her properly and in a non-autist fashion. But other than that, those were the only Own Voices books I found with deaf characters. I was able to find a whole list of books on Goodreads that had deaf and hard of hearing protagonists, and a lot of them did sign, but as far as I know, all the authors of those were hearing. And if they weren't, then maybe I just didn't find it in their blurbs, or I couldn't find any info on them. So maybe like half the books I found were actually Own Voices books, but I couldn't be sure. So I'm asking you guys, my fans, my followers, if you're just wandering in here looking for random booktube videos or DiverseAthon videos, if you're aware of any kind of books that have deaf, hard of hearing protagonists and are written by deaf, hard of hearing authors, or failing that, at least something written by a hearing author who has been able to give a proper and respectful representation of the deaf, hard of hearing community, because I'd love to read those books, and I'm sure there's plenty of other people who'd love to read them as well. So anyways, if this does come out on Friday, then we have 3.5 days left to finish the books, and I have 3 books left to read, so I think I'm actually doing pretty well, all things considered. And I hope everybody else doing this readathon is having just as great a time as I am. I know we can do this. Good luck with your TBRs, and I'll see you all later.